What up, yo?
Yo, yo.
We rolling? Yeah, so another video sent to me. Ultra interesting. The last one was interesting because it was a PragerU video. So it was a somewhat conservative vegan video. So this one, though, I noticed this one, Earthling Ed again had a debate with a libertarian. So I have a feeling I'm going to go out on a limb and say I'm probably not going to agree with anything this guy has to say, because if he's on the other end and he's a libertarian, I just have too many good arguments. Okay, so anyway.
Just to clarify, when you say on the other end, because he's a libertarian, what do you mean on the other end?
If he's on the other, if he's against veganism and he's libertarian, that just confuses me.
Yes.
So I think it's up here, right? Move. Oh, yeah. We don't need to see you.
Wait, I'll hide back here.
So this video is by Earthling Ed, and it's called "Libertarian Refuses to Have His Freedom Denied by Vegan."
Ooh.
Wow. So we're gonna get going.
Participate in any formation of a government.
But of course, when we're talking about social contracts, humans with a lack of certain cognitive abilities, they also...
Sorry.
Could you not just eat vegan 3 times a day when you eat and then focus all of your other energy on these interpersonal relationships that you clearly care about and are, of course, very important?
I could, and I know this will sound cold to you, but ultimately I don't want to, and I feel that there is no obligation.
Whilst I understand that you don't want to, wants are not good justifications when it comes to the exploitation of others. The want in and of itself shouldn't make it morally permissible. Hi, Jed. My name is Ed, and nice little rhyme. And it's lovely to meet you. Thank you so much for sitting down and having a conversation with me. As you know, you're welcome. As you know, I have a banner, and it says, "Why aren't you vegan yet?" I'm wondering, what are your thoughts about that question?
So as a libertarian, I believe that people should have the freedom to do with their life, body, and lifestyle as they wish. And I believe that I very much respect the fact that you're vegan, and I hope that there are businesses which cater to you, and that if there aren't everywhere, given how big the vegan culture is now, they're really missing out, and they should hop in on it. Yeah. But I also believe that we should, those of us who do not care to be vegan, I think those of us who do like meat, since after all we are made with both kinds of teeth as humans, we do have both the carnivorous and the herbivorous teeth. Yep. I believe that there should be no cultural pressure for us to be vegan. I believe that if we enjoy eating meat from ultimately different species, lower species, if they weren't lower species, then why haven't they destroyed us yet?
Okay, so me as a libertarian, and as most libertarians that I know, believe in the non-aggression principle, which is not doing harm or doing least amount of harm as possible. And also as libertarians, where we tend to be against government subsidies, and with meat being off the charts, overwhelmingly subsidized,
most heavily subsidized
food industry that we have. You know, it's a little confusing for me to see someone, you know, it's kind of like he's like, oh, well, I think as libertarians we should have the right to choose for what things we buy, you know, and pay taxes on. It's just like, well, wait, you know, it's like people, libertarians who buy lots of new cars and stuff. It's like confusing because it's like, but you're contributing to taxation, which is the whole opposite of the whole libertarian thing. But I'm still interested to see
where he goes,
what this guy has to say.
Okay, let's stop there
So
for
yes.
a second. The first thing, just very briefly, to do with the teeth. Many herbivorous animals also have canine teeth. I'm not saying we're herbivores, biologically speaking, but just because we have canines doesn't provide us with a moral justification to harm animals. You know, we can do a multitude of things, but just because we have the capacity to do those things doesn't provide us with the justification to do so. The first point you made about being a libertarian was about kind of like, you know, individual sovereignty and the right to your own kind of like life and existence. But what about the animals? Why does our right to our own sovereignty and our own individuality and our own body, how is it morally justified to come at the expense of someone else?
So, as a libertarian, ultimately, I believe that our government, I like the libertarian form of government, and ultimately, it is the government. Government is a contract between individuals and a sovereign state, so that we do not all murder each other and we live in some sort of order.
Yeah.
And animals are not included in this.
Wait, what?
Not currently, of course.
Well, they would not be able to participate in. They would not be able to actively participate in any formation of a government.
What?
So libertarianism is a style of government. Where you said where there's
I guess so. It's like it was almost like he explained the social contract. Like he's it's an unwritten contract between government and the people. The libertarian form of government.
I think this
what
man's
is this guy
confused.
talking
I think
about?
he's a little confused as far as the fundamentals of what he's labeling himself.
Yeah. Because libertarian is small to zero government. And libertarianism, or has nothing to do with making a contract with the government in order to not kill each other. We know as libertarians that if there were no laws against killing each other, people would still probably not kill each other. Just because something is legalized doesn't mainly mean like you aren't going to go do it tomorrow if it became illegal. You're not going to be like more apt to go kill someone. It's still going to be a horrible thing.
Yeah, you can't legalize morality or moral values. They don't come from the government. They come from the individual. Individual rights come from or inherent with being, etc., etc. Those are the values of libertarianism, not a style of government where animals can't be involved. I think he thinks he's like a peace and freedom. No, I don't know. I think he just thinks libertarian means you get to do anything you want. Or small government. It just means a smaller government when it's more about the idea is individual liberty, not a contract with the government, so we don't kill each other. But sure, let's continue.
Oh boy.
But of course, when we're talking about social contracts, humans with a lack of certain cognitive abilities, they also can't engage in the social contracts that we're discussing. Are their lives less morally valuable because they can't engage in the same social contracts that you and I can?
Well, ultimately, they will eventually be able to, but also
not someone who's cognitively impaired in the ways that we're discussing right now.
Perhaps not, but they are also human. And ultimately, different species have different social contracts. For example, how about if we're going to talk about animals in general, what about the wolves? Should we chastise them? Should we reprimand them for...
we're not wolves.
I think we're muted.
Feeding on species which are lower down the food chain?
Animals
We aren't dogs.
in the wild who kill other animals do so out of necessity. They do so to survive. We don't have that excuse. And also, we have moral agency. On the one hand, we're referring to ourselves as higher beings. They're lower beings. But on the other hand, we're trying to use what they do to justify our morality. It can't be both things. So animals in the wild don't have the moral agency that we do. Because we have moral agency, we're able to rationalize our choices, and we're able to understand the positives and negatives of those choices. And because we live in a society where we have the choice to do something else, that's something else reducing suffering, then morally speaking, to me, that's the preferable choice to make. What do you think about that?
I guess first I would ask you, what is human morality? What is human moral agency?
Well, morality in its purest philosophical terms is, of course, subjective. I don't have a spiritual or religious belief that creates a definition of what is moral or immoral, but I think that we can, by and large, try and understand morality as being something that is seeking to reduce harm and suffering, something that's working to create a society that is more quote unquote utopian, even though that word is, of course, impractical because it will never exist. It's about pursuing goals and aspirations that make life better for as many people and as many beings as possible. So reducing suffering, basically.
So altruism. Altruism.
I mean, I guess you could go down the route of altruism, yes.
So one question that I would ask is, if it came down to reducing the suffering or the hunger of human beings and the, I guess, the death of animals, which would you choose?
Would I choose an animal over a human if the human is starving? Is that the question you're asking?
Yes.
If in times of necessity, you can morally justify something. So if a human is starving and requires, needs to kill a chicken to survive, then of course the human could justify that. But that's not the situation we're in. In an extreme situation, you could find reasons to save one life over the other. Case in point, let's say a building is on fire, and inside the building you have a 5-year-old child and a 95-year-old human. You could justify saving the 5-year-old child over the 95-year-old human because the child has their life ahead of them, all these different factors. But that doesn't justify needlessly harming the elderly in a normal society. Same with the animals. We don't have the choice between a chicken and a human. If we did, you could definitely choose the human over the chicken, but our choice is human, chicken, or neither. And because we have the neither choice, that is the morally preferable choice to make.
But one thing that I want to return to is you mentioned that there shouldn't be a hierarchy of beings.
Yeah,
but,
I didn't say that.
Okay, so you do say that in a time between choosing a chicken and a human, you would choose the human.
In a situation of necessity where I had no choice but to choose one or the other, you could find justifications for why the human life would be worth saving over the chicken's life. This doesn't disprove veganism, because veganism is the stance that in a situation where we have the option to not harm either life, that is the morally obligated decision to make. What do you think? When we have the choice between human, chicken, or neither, what is the morally obligated choice to make?
I believe and respect that. I believe that anyone should have the capacity to choose what they believe their obligation is, so long as they do not actively infringe on the rights of another human being in our society.
Can I let's remove farm animals and let's go for any animal. Yeah. Could I kick a dog, stomp a dog to death? Could I poach an elephant? Could I hunt a whale? Can I do anything to any other animal based on the fact that I am a human? And as a libertarian yourself, that's the only thing that has a sovereign value when it comes to species.
Has our society outlawed these things? Are we living in a society that has outlawed?
Does legality equal morality?
In my view, I do not believe that there is an intrinsic morality.
So just because something is legal doesn't mean that it's wrong or right?
I believe that ultimately a government comes together and they inform society of their laws, which are essentially the moral values and the moral codes to abide by, so as to make this
change, right?
Society.
Laws change as do.
So you're not a libertarian then?
Yeah.
You're not a libertarian. Don't call yourself that. Got it. You're
not
a
at all.
statist.
Morals within society.
Exactly. Because it is a top-down movement.
Yeah. So we challenge things regardless of the legality of those things. So just because, killing a pig is legal, but hunting, poaching an elephant is illegal, doesn't mean that killing a pig is moral.
Dude probably saw a couple Ron Paul videos in 2012, and that's it.
Oh, this dude's younger because isn't he on a college campus? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess 2012
so
was
these
a long
are
time ago now,
I'm thinking he went to on Reddit, he had read a couple of maybe Our Libertarian or something, very surface level, and then just oh, this is a cool position to have.
I've heard someone else talk about it.
Yeah, and hasn't really put the thought and followed through with the fundamentals and principles of this ism that he's using and applying it to his own life and actually thinking about it. Obviously,
he's obviously in NorCal right now. Isn't Stanford in San Francisco?
And poaching an elephant is immoral, because morality and legality, whilst they should be the same, of course we would think that they should be, in actuality they're not.
Well, I would say that different people can have different opinions of it, and ultimately what matters in the only thing that objectively matters is what the law is.
So what's your opinion then? Let's say a dog's walking past now. Can I stomp that dog to death if I want to?
Is it outlawed here? What is the law here?
Does your government tell you if you can do it or not? Because that's how we know it's good. That's libertarianism, right?
No, let's say it's not outlawed. Let's say for a hypothetical situation, currently where we are, it's not outlawed for me to stomp that dog to death. What is your personal opinion on the morality of me doing so?
I do not operate with the idea of a morality. So I personally wouldn't. I don't.
He's like a nihilist or something. He's like, I don't have feelings about anything, as long as it's
feel the need to. But if you did, okay.
Outside of a legal system, anyone should be allowed to do whatever they want as long as they personally think that that's fine, and you wouldn't stop that.
That's why we created legal systems, because we were going around and we would just go around and kill each other for a meal.
What about in cultures where, let's say, homosexuality is illegal? Is homosexuality immoral in those cultures because it's illegal?
Well, that's also why I don't believe in moral systems personally. I believe that they are societal constructs.
So is homosexuality immoral in societies where the construct is that it's illegal?
In that society, they have constructed themselves in that way that, yes.
What do you think?
I support homosexuality fully.
So you support homosexuality, but in a culture where it's illegal, you think it's acceptable. Don't want to put words in your mouth, but so they should be challenged then.
I support challenging them, yes.
Right. So outside of cultures and outside of laws, we now accept that just because something is cultural or something is legal or illegal doesn't mean that it is moral or immoral, and we should challenge things regardless of their cultural or legal status.
You have the right and capacity to challenge them peacefully.
Okay, peacefully. Okay, great. So we accept that now. The important thing that we need to establish is that culture doesn't define morality, or more importantly, something isn't moral simply because it's cultural. And secondly, something isn't moral simply because it's legal/illegal. Okay, great. So when it comes to animals, then for you, in your personal opinion, is there any moral consideration that a non-human animal deserves? Do they deserve anything, any consideration at all?
They do not deserve anything. No, we can give them, but anything that we give them is grace. It is not something that they intrinsically deserve.
Why do humans intrinsically deserve
property, right?
Yeah. Well, the next question he needs to be asked, and maybe he's about to ask this, is where do human rights come from? Why do they, or perhaps that would be the next line of questioning then.
Moral consideration.
Because we are creating the society amongst ourselves.
Okay, but what is it about being human?
Because we are creating the society.
Intrinsically deserve.
It is not something that they intrinsically deserve.
Why do humans intrinsically deserve moral consideration?
Because we are creating the society amongst ourselves.
Okay, but what is it about being human that means that we deserve more? Because that's not deserving, that's not intrinsic. You're saying that value to a human is created based on the society that we've created. But what about in environments where they haven't created the societies that we have? Is there something intrinsic about a human that means that we deserve value or should be viewed with value?
I think that we as humans can be more accepting, but in technicality, for example, within the United States, I believe that somebody who does not have a direct affiliation with the United States, be they, like you said, a work visa, or be they a permanent resident, or be they a citizen, technically, they do not have...
He should have started, me not being a libertarian, that should have been how he started this. And this should have been called, not libertarian, refused to have freedom denied by vegan.
Yeah, or self-declared libertarian, self-declared and in quotes libertarian, but yeah.
Have any rights in the United States. You could argue something with like the United Nations, but they technically do not have any rights in the United States. But I think that we would be more favorable to them than an animal, because we do ultimately, humans have a potential to interact with human societies in a way that a wolf does not. The way that we, as wolves would not give us the rights.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter. That's irrelevant about what wolves would or wouldn't do. It's about what we do with the intelligence that we have. And again, I bring it back to the question I asked earlier. What about a human who has a cognitive impairment that means that they can't engage in society in the way that we're talking, that they can't engage in the things that we're discussing, that you say assign humans worth? Do those people not deserve moral consideration as well because they can't engage in the way that we're talking about?
I mean, they are definitely affiliated with I would say that they are affiliated with our society.
What do you mean by affiliated?
For example, do they have a affiliate? If they have like residency, or if they have like just a legal affiliation with the United States, then they are subject to all of the laws and protections afforded by the United States.
So a human being's moral worth is based on the legal protections assigned to them as citizens of the United States. So before citizenship,
the objective worth. Now, personally, we can have differences, and we did discuss the whole argument of like a society which is homophobic.
Yes.
And I certainly respect your opinion that that you can be that like veganism is moral, and I am not going to challenge it. I'm not going to say that you are wrong.
Okay.
I am just saying that we can coexist.
Oh, we can coexist. We do. The problem isn't you and I, because I'm not the victim and neither are you in this conversation. The problem is the animal. They can't coexist in this scenario. So we're not talking as a victim and an oppressor. We're talking as two oppressors, or a potential oppressor and a current oppressor. And we're talking about a victim. And what I'm saying is that, what about their rights? What about their standing? Now, you're saying that they don't have those under the law. Okay, fair enough. But that's just because of the legal system that we have. Legality changes, as does morality. But I think when it comes to humans, what means that we have moral worth isn't the laws or that are granted to US citizens. It's to do with basic things such as sentience, consciousness, the capacity to experience. When I stab, if I was to stab someone, it wouldn't be wrong for me to stab that person because they're a US citizen and they're protected by the law. It would be wrong for me to stab that person because stabbing them causes them harm, and it's unnecessary for me to do so. The same is true of the animals. Stabbing them to death and cutting their throats is wrong because it's unnecessary for me to do it and for you to do it, and it is a non-consensual thing that harms them for a needless reason. They too have sentience and consciousness and the capacity to experience. They may not be protected by the law, but they still feel and still suffer and still have the capacities that in my eyes, surely must create moral worth for them as individuals.
I do believe that they have the capacity to feel, and I do also believe that we actually underestimate their intelligence, and but I will also say that, and this is the biologist starting to come in, the cerebral cortex, ultimately, we have a greater ability to think conceptually, to think abstractly, which is why we're even having this discussion right now. Than any other species, which
does that justify arbitrarily harming them? Because we're saying might makes right. Because we have these cognitive advancements, because we're intellectually superior, we therefore have the right to dominate. Do you think that's true? Does intelligence and power create the moral justification to tyrannize?
Well, ultimately, that is the question of human history, isn't it?
It is. And unfortunately, human history is fraught of examples of why that shouldn't be the case.
And it's still an ongoing conversation amongst humans. So one question that I would have actually is perhaps, is veganism, is this the pressing issue when we still have so many cases of human rights? Is this the conversation that we should be having? Should we not perhaps wait until we have our house in order?
Well, I don't think we'll ever have our house in order, unfortunately. But the point is, social justice issues aren't mutually exclusive. You can be in favor of multiple social justice issues and campaign on behalf of multiple social justice issues as well. It's not an either-or scenario. The thing about veganism is what we consume is passive. And what I mean by that is we have to eat. We don't have that's non-negotiable. Yeah. So to be vegan just means the 3 times a day where we eat meals, if we eat something else, right, now we can go and campaign on behalf of all these other issues that need campaign on behalf of. But if we just make that small change, we can not only reduce animal suffering significantly, but also human suffering. There are huge intersections between human exploitation and indeed the agricultural industry as well. So we need to attack all of these things, but we shouldn't just discount something because there is something else. We could discount feminism because there's still issues of human exploitation in the Southeast or something of Asia. So there are all these different problems that exist, but we shouldn't discount one problem because another problem also exists at the same time. We should work to solve all of them. When it comes to the options that we have available in front of us, do you think that reducing the suffering of animals should be the morally preferable choice, considering that you acknowledge that they feel, and you also, and I agree with you on this, you think that we as a species discount their intelligence? And maybe do you think that because we do that, and because they also have the capacity to experience, like you've acknowledged, that they should be given the moral consideration to not be needlessly exploited and killed, considering that it harms them in a non-consensual way?
All the same, I still do believe that the societally agreed pleasure of a human comes before the pleasure of an animal.
it's not about the pleasure of the animal. It's about their entire existence. It's about their life. It's about everything that they have, everything that's precious and valuable to them. We're saying that our pleasure is more important than their very being. And not only our pleasure, but 15 minutes of pleasure. We eat a meal, it's 15 minutes. We're talking about that 15 minutes of pleasure. And beyond that, we can eat, delicious plant-based foods. So even if you were to say that you enjoyed, meat 30% more than you enjoyed a plant-based meal, let's say a beef stew or a chicken curry or whatever it might be, and you say, oh, I'll enjoy that 30% more than I would a plant-based version. We're now saying that 30% difference in pleasure that lasts for 15 minutes is more valuable than someone else's entire life and existence.
Earthling's Ed's pretty good. Usually, I'm talking a lot more.
Everything that they hold valuable to them, gone for 15 minutes of a 30% difference in taste pleasure.
When you talk about the life, and actually, this actually brings me to perhaps the environment ecology. And what happens many times is if you remove a predator, if the predator species dies off, then the ones that would, I guess you could call them victims, and they are victims of the predators of the high chain, they run rampant, and actually their own goods, they actually eat themselves out of nutrients, and actually it ends up being bad.
It'd be funny if you look at this guy. He's pretty beefcake, so obviously probably eats lots of meat, so he probably has thought about this quite a bit. And these are all the things that he's told himself to make himself
justify.
Justification. He's coping with.
Of course.
Wow, I do kill a lot of animals, and it's funny to watch these college kids squirm, just like
for the
college debate kids, because they're always the one heading up
entire environment. So is it possible that would you perhaps do you believe that there is a possibility humans have a role in the predatory chain?
Well, not in the agricultural system that we have, because these are animals that we farm are either artificially bred by humans using their hands, or we facilitate the breeding and existence and procreation of these animals. So the animals that we farm and eat are not part of a natural food chain or a natural ecosystem. And actually, as you're probably well aware, the farming of animals has a huge ecological cost. The habitat loss, the deforestation, the land use. All of these things contribute to animal agriculture reducing wild biodiversity, which is, of course, a huge problem as well. So that context, no, the context that we support, definitely not, because that's not the relationship that exists. Actually, wildlife and the natural world would flourish if we eliminated this incredibly harmful aspect of what we do, for industries and for consumption.
Then I have another question. I guess now the reason why people can talk about veganism legitimately being able to supplement you is because you are capable of having artificial proteins and supplements that would naturally come either from an animal or from an animal product, since veganism is also about the elimination of utilizing animal products. But what about for humans who cannot afford these supplements, especially
all protein on the planet came from plants? There's no such thing as animal protein.
the ones of the best quality?
I don't know what this guy's talking about. What did he say? Unnatural proteins?
He said artificial proteins, which is BS. Maybe I think I'm assuming the word he meant and what or at least what he should have used was processed,
possibly,
but still that doesn't check out. Yeah,
processed.
Exactly. Like you're talking about people who are trying to up their protein intake are using artificial processed protein from animal sources.
This dude's eating whey protein. He's beefcakes. Looks like Francis Sangani.
I hear where you're going. Just want to stop you very quickly. Just on the artificial protein thing, we don't need to consume artificial proteins. We don't take protein supplements. You can take protein powders, but that's not a vegan, non-vegan thing. Lots of non-vegans have protein powders, and you get more than enough protein from whole plant food. So protein, no. Supplements, no. Yes, you do want to have a supplement, and that supplement would maybe be like a B12 or like a vitamin D, which we should all have. Maybe less so in California, but generally speaking, most people should have a vitamin D supplement, vegan or non-vegan. When it comes to supplement quality, there's really not much discrepancy in quality, and you can get supplements that are less expensive than a piece of red meat, for example. But the more pressing issue is what you were saying about people that can't afford it. Not that can't afford the supplements, because the supplements, in terms of value and expense, is no different to buying, most things. But in terms of just a general affordability and accessibility, the reason I have these conversations here is because, by and large, everyone that sits down and speaks to me is in a situation where they can be vegan. There are people who don't have that luxury in certain parts of the US and, of course, in certain parts of the world.
Okay, I'm going to stop him real quick, because this dude, he doesn't understand that he wouldn't be able to afford meat if the government wasn't paying for 90% of it. Like, he doesn't understand clearly, and as a libertarian, I'm shocked he doesn't understand the amount of subsidies going towards the meat and dairy industry. It is insanely expensive. It is economically insane to raise animals to kill them and eat them like we do
at
now.
The level, yeah, at the
so for this guy to think that meat's just cheap, it's free market, that's just the price of meat, and it has nothing to do with the subsidies, is just shocking. And I'd love to talk to Ed about this stuff, because I think that would be a whole nother wild
layer.
Angle to argue, or at least with if he's at a conservative school or not. Economical.
But that changes then. It's less of a moral obligation when it's not a necessity. But for you and I, because we can, that's where this conversation becomes especially pertinent, because we have that choice. Do you recognize that it is a choice for you, that you could be vegan if you wanted to be?
I do recognize that, yes.
That's really good. And so with it being a choice then, on what grounds do you think that it's acceptable to choose to inflict more harm on just...
Oh, yeah.
It's Usman, not...
That's what he looks like.
Or who did I say? Ngannou. No. Yeah.
Someone else, then you need to.
I recognize that on your grounds, it is unacceptable, but ultimately I have different grounds. I have a different worldview.
What are your grounds then? Define those. You may have already done it, but just for the point of this, reiterate what your grounds are.
My grounds are that in this, as humans, we form society because we realize that we are all better off if we work together, and that we can create our own goods. We can, at the agricultural revolution, we are better off if we don't, if we aren't worrying of somebody every night coming and just taking an evening's meal from us and our lives along with it. So that is ultimately the beginnings of society, and the freer a society, the more people are able to interact. I believe that we are actually better off. But ultimately, I believe that humans are sovereign and that we have the greatest abilities, and that if we did not, we would be proven wrong and the animals would have destroyed us.
Okay, well, I mean, the animals don't have the capacity to do...
Because we're all fighting to the death. Everything and all animals, we're all fighting to the death.
I'm sorry. Hold on. I just need to hear that one more time. His little ending statement.
We have the greatest abilities, and that if we did not, we would be proven wrong and the animals would have destroyed us.
Okay, well, I mean, the animals don't have the capacity to do that, but that doesn't make harming them acceptable. Now, what I would say, society has always changed. What you've described as being like the evolution and creation of a society, absolutely true. But society always changes, and thankfully it does, because there's never been a point in human history, and it certainly isn't now either, where society is as good as it could be. Society can always improve and get better, and importantly, we can always learn more, and we can always understand our relationship with others around us, and hopefully become better citizens and create a better world as a consequence. So society changes, and whilst currently in the current society that we live in, these may be the contracts that currently exist, and this may be the situation that we're currently in. That doesn't mean that in the future we shouldn't then start to think about animals deserving moral consideration, because when we talk about issues of morality, it's always important that we keep challenging ourselves and learning from our past behaviors. I do agree with that. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. And so I think we need to look beyond just these societal constructs. We need to look at something a little bit more intrinsic. And I think that intrinsic is empathy and moral agency. And whilst we could be, and I'm going to use the word pedantic, I know I'm not saying that you are being pedantic, but I think maybe you are being a bit pedantic. We can be pedantic and create this kind of like construct that defines our morality. But ultimately, I think when it boils down to it, when we see situations of harm and suffering, that's not the rationalization that we have. When we see situations of harm and suffering, we empathize with those enduring that harm and suffering. And that's why I think we can understand it's wrong, because we can understand what they're going through. So I think empathy is the cornerstone to creating a better society. Now, we can empathize with animals. We can empathize with their suffering. We can acknowledge what they're enduring. And because we can empathize with them, and because we know what they're going through, we know what it's that experience, it comes negatively to them. I think from a moral perspective, that's how society becomes better. Your life might not be made significantly better. From an environmental perspective, sure, animal agriculture is it hugely environmentally damaging. So removing that is better for the environment and better for humans in that context. But even as an individual, although you may not feel a benefit within your own life for the destabilization of animal exploitation, the betterment to society comes from reducing suffering. And when we acknowledge that, I think suffering breeds suffering, and violence can breed violence. Slaughterhouse workers have mental health problems. They can become increasingly violent because of the work that they do. Society is negatively impacted by what we do to animals. And I don't think that we'll ever have a world, which I think we probably both want, which is just a nicer world, right? I don't think we will ever have that, while we have facilities and places where we knowingly put billions, trillions of sentient animals through a process that we know consciously causes them pain and ultimately takes their life. And I think that's morality for me. It's about empathy and extending that empathy in ways that make practical sense, which to animals it does.
I may be allowed to give closing remarks. So I very much respect and I admire your arguments. I think that they are very well put together, and I do not disagree with them on your grounds. What I do say is that I think that we have a long way to go in terms of human relations and human societies. And I think that maybe this may sound like a kick the can down the road argument, but I believe that we would be better served focusing on our own species, and even within that, like the subunits of our own species, like our own societies, and then eventually our own species, before we start considering others. But I do believe that we can have these conversations
Why not do both?
On a broader scale, policy scale, a couple centuries down the line.
A couple of centuries. I certainly hope that that's not the case. Okay.
And if we're having trouble as humans not killing each other, wouldn't it be a good exercise to first start by stopping killing animals?
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be like
stop the practice of oppression and murder, so to speak?
Yeah.
On other species?
And it's a lot of these, like, these factory workers that go off into the military, that are the really crazy ones, and it's like, it's just that type of behavior breeds a certain mentality that is just not nice to have around. But yeah,
just for the sake of argument, could it not be that for you, when you buy food, you just buy plant-based food and then put all of your energy into focusing on these other issues and focusing on creating better societies and better relationships for interpersonal relationships between humans? Could you not just eat vegan 3 times a day when you eat, and then focus all of your other energy on these interpersonal relationships that you clearly care about and are of course very important? But is that not just a small thing that you could do that just negates that aspect, but then doesn't take away from you being able to do everything else that you care about?
I could, and I know this will sound cold to you, but ultimately I don't want to, and I feel that there is no obligation. But I feel that we could, as a society, agree that there is a moral obligation once we have our house mostly in order.
So he's a collectivist.
We're going to have to wrap it up there.
I mean, the libertarianism is all about individual rights, sovereignty, everything, responsibility, and he's speaking from a collective. He finally, when he can squeeze out
the good of
his
the society,
guy's own opinion, he's like, I'm not going to do shit, but society, the collective will take care of it in a couple.
May even be a communist.
That's the complete opposite of libertarianism, and the principles behind that label, at least, which he threw around. Which is wild how Earthling Ed somehow understands libertarianism better than this guy, who's a college student, I would assume. But yeah, wild.
Wow.
Yeah. That was super funny, though. Sorry, I'm sure there are people closing out.
Thank you so much for a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
Jed, I love that name, by the way. It reminds me of something. It's really good. But whilst I really, I've got to go. But I just want to say, whilst I understand that you don't want to, wants are not good justifications when it comes to the exploitation of others. Many people want to do something, but that want shouldn't get in the fact that if there is a victim who's been harmed as a consequence of that want, the want in and of itself shouldn't make it morally permissible. Okay, maybe we leave. Thanks, gents. Have a great day.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate it. Have a great life as well, by the way. We'll probably never see each other again. All right, bye.
What's wild too is like these college kids, they almost all agree at the end on the same thing. They're like, well, I agree with the ethics. I'm just not ready to do it right now, basically, or don't care enough because the brainwashing is fucking woo-wee. The brainwashing is deep. That's for sure. The brainwashing is very severe. I watched my daughter go from not wanting to eat animals to wanting to eat animals the second she went to public school, basically. So it's deep, and it's some of the deepest brainwashing that we go through, because we're not we have meat forced on us when we don't have a choice whether or not we eat it or not, or like it or not. And I mean, if you think about it, everyone, all these carnivore guys are always like, oh, it doesn't even really taste like anything. Like, wouldn't it taste like something good if we're supposed to eat it? And it not tasting like anything and being gross. Yeah. When it's forced on you as a child, you don't have a choice. So from childhood, most likely, on till your late teen to early 20s, where you start actually like making your own choices, you're completely bombarded with carnist propaganda, and it's tough to get over it. But I mean, it's been wild. I've been back in we've been up in where I grew up, and I've been bumping into lots of old friends and like siblings of my old friends, and it's just been wild seeing how just how much older and how many people have passed away, and how many people are literally obese, old friends of mine and stuff. And they just it's lots of carne asada burritos.
I was gonna say, are they carnists?
Yeah.
Bummer.
A lot of burritos and burgers. Yeah.
It's all yummy, plant-based.
But anyway, so yeah, that was pretty shocking. Dude's not a libertarian in the least bit. Not a single. I mean, he had 2 lines he said that were something he thought was libertarian. The whole like, I don't even know. He had some fractured arguments, like libertarian statements that he had mixed up. He just kind of threw them all out.
You could tell just regurgitating, and then he just deflect to another topic or another issue. Oh, well, what about the environment? Like, what about the no.
Yeah.
You can't call yourself a libertarian.
No,
how dare you?
That was really bad.
He's a libertarianist.
Libertarianist, like
Michaela Peterson.
Like Michaela Peterson.
Yeah. That was super funny.
And that was what was that lady on the Young Turks that said that too? Or she said volunteerism, and then she thought volunteerism was
like volunteering,
was the whole, everyone volunteers for everything.
Yeah. No, the Young Turks.
Yeah, but this dude's not libertarian. Libertarianism has nothing to do with making any contracts with the government. If anything, some libertarians believe in somehow restraining and regulating a small government and like keeping a small government around, which really doesn't work ever.
Still, the central theme, the idea is individual liberty.
Yeah.
And especially not that morality is that which is what is legislated by the government. Like, what? That's crazy. That is
we eat processed foods. I'm doing yeah. What did Devin? But yeah, that dude doesn't know shit. That was shocking. I thought I mean, if you call yourself a libertarian, you can spit a little bit of game, and make any layman think you are a libertarian. But that guy, I'd be surprised if Ed actually thought he was a libertarian. But Stanford, that's San Francisco, isn't it? That's up here.
Is that where Stanford is? Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's like one of the first West Coast schools, big West Coast school. So yeah, it's funny. But anyway, say hi, Steve.
He's been quiet. He was good.
He's being very nice to us.
Thank you, sir.
But anyway, we'll talk to you guys later. Peace.